G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 7th of March 2026. Now the war of words between Viktor Orbán and Vladimir Zelenskyy has turned from insults to threats. Vladimir Zelenskyy has threatened Viktor Orbán with violence. Are you surprised that the desperate Napoleon, with his army in tatters, though he has not yet been forced into full retreat, is threatening those behind him to unconditionally support his war for his glory? While the criticisms of Trump are many, I do not think that one of them is anything other than misplaced direction, that the left cannot take out their frustrations on Zelenskyy because they'll be kicked out of the fascist club, so they take their claims, so they cannot claim Zelensky's the fascist who remains in office unelected, who routinely steals while in office. They cannot criticize him for being an ruling by autocracy, that he ignores the will of Parliament, and that he's a warmonger. So they take it out on Trump. Now Europe, of course, are on a holy crusade to liberate Russia, except they won't admit it, and they will not admit that their war plans are completely and utterly a disaster. I could tell you quite simply that Fortress Europe, right, is a disaster. Because in order to have a fortress, you have to be very selective who comes in. You have to be willing to even expel your own people for non-compliance to the very strict code. You have to have a set goal. And if you fortify your cities, you still have to patrol the countryside. You still have to have layers of defenses, and you have to have lots of checkpoints. Now, this is all a net drag on the productivity of society. So, you have to have a robust economy. Now, Europe does not have a robust economy. It has a very dependent economy on US trade. So, instead of being nice to America, they bully America so that out of fear of social isolation, you will not comply with their demands to buy your goods at their prices, do not compete with their goods, and accept that they will put tariffs on your goods while you have to not put tariffs on their goods. Do you start to see a picture? So everything they accuse Donald Trump of is nothing but manipulation, to make you afraid, to make you turn against Trump so Europe can get its way, so Zelenskyy can get its way. They accuse Trump of being a poodle so that he will capitulate to them. This has always been. You could go back multiple presidents. In fact, you could go back over 200 years of European pearl clutching, all the way back to Jefferson in France, the negotiations before America and the Revolution, when Jefferson was but a representative in France, with Napoleon telling him America is nothing but a country of naive children who will never achieve anything. Well, if you've achieved nothing, you've outlasted Napoleon. Yet time and time again, every 10 years, Americans act as if they've never heard it before. I can get it if you're 6. I can get it if you're 16 and not paying attention. 26, okay, you probably actually heard it for the first time because you're finally paying attention. But by 36 onwards, you have heard the same arguments over and over and over again, and you should literally, anybody over 26 should literally never be a liberal. You know that it is nothing but an angry nag who scolds, who bullies, and routinely lies to get their way. They have no goal beyond getting as much off you as they can. They are nothing but feminists. They've always been feminists. Feminism didn't start with the women's suffrage movement. It was an aristocratic indulgence. Aristocratic women were never oppressed. They were the oppressors of their fellow women. They wanted servants, and they sacrificed young women to be prostitutes to their husbands, so they didn't have to be. They were winning because prostitutes only got shillings in those days. Not pennies, shillings. You could live off a handful of them per day. But that is where it all started. Rich women were selling young ladies. The socialite was a madam, usually also a prostitute. Often they end up being wives because, as skillful, artful manipulators who had the ear of many, they could come to the rich man with all sorts of tips and blackmail material. And this is the truth about the success of the liberal establishment. Now, I am not saying it's a white man thing. This has been actually probably the entire history of the Chinese aristocratic, or the most India. Do you know what yoga really is? It is a series of pelvic exercises to limber and loosen the muscles of women for the purposes of prostitution and exotic dance in the courts of the Maharajas. The entire world, rhythmic dance in Africa, was used by the African kings, in which after tribal wars, enslaved women would be exchanged. Sometimes, if a warrior was particularly bold, he would get a gift. But normally, the loser of these battles, they often did not fight over anything but the exchange of women. Who got what? The entire history of the world has revolved around conflict. Because if you could not swing your dick and bring home the bacon, the madam would close and lock her door. So knights, when the castles of Europe were no longer hiring, they became sellswords in Ukraine. And that is how Ukraine started, as sellswords for the Hugar and the Magyar and the Tatar and the Rus. Along the way, Turks and others all invaded Crimea. Now, we can dispute the original settlement of Crimea was either the Greeks or the Tatar. Now, it is predominantly thought it was the Greeks, and that the Tatar, when they invaded, wiped out the first Greek settlements, and that later Greek Orthodox who came up through Turkey, who settled Sevastopol, while the Tatar were on the Kerch Peninsula. Now, the Tatar were roving tribes out of... Now, that is also disputed whether the Turkestan, Kazakhstan, but the Great Rus Sea, as it was actually called by some, was a great expanse of grass, and horsemen from Tibet all the way through Mongolia, all the way through to Ukraine. Now, over the years, tribes settled and disputed Crimea. But I'm pretty safe to say Crimea is closer to Russia than it is to England. So why has England and got 100-year-long boner to occupy Crimea? Well, it's to control the flow of world trade. England has and still does want to occupy ports. Right now, it is in a competition between America and China and India to try and get control of ports. Most ports are somewhat foreign controlled, usually conglomerates, now there were 7 big companies based in England, and for a long time, some of them are Anglo-American, some of them are, they are not solely British companies anymore. Now, China, as you know, has taken Sri Lanka and many other ports around the world. So has India. So has America. Mostly through companies, although China directly controls most of Sri Lanka, through politicals. They tried the Solomon Islands. They still have a lot of influence there. They got the port of Darwin, and they've threatened military force if anybody tries to oust them. Even though their takeover was illegal, the loan, they upped the loan, they changed the terms of the loan, they upped the interest rates during the terms of the loan to make sure the debt was unpayable. This is what they did to Africa. This is why there is trouble in Nigeria. They actually tried this against the Russians in Crimea. Yes, the Chinese tried to seize Crimea off Russia at one point. There are no good guys in this Ukraine war. People keep forgetting. Ukraine initially was pushed into war back in 2014 by China and Obama. People do not want to know anymore because the liberal establishment controls the news, and even people on the right who routinely watch Fox News are being routinely shifted slowly to the left by Lachlan and the Rhino and the Paul Ryan and the neoliberal establishment of New York, who is made up of, I would say, what you would call soft shoe Republicans, right? They are willing to work with the other side, the crusty Isle of who must Republicans. Now, there are a few holdouts in Fox, but I would not trust Hannity. I would not trust... no, for now, it's only... I would say even Gutfeld is a worry. I just cannot. I mean, Jesse Waters, might be the only outspoken Republican left in the entire state of New York. No, I'm just kidding. But it sometimes feels like Republicans give up way too easily, and that is because of liberal swarm tactics. Now, this is a tactic the Nazis used and is now being used in Ukraine, where anybody who speaks out against the Ukraine war is swarmed, and you get this on social media, and there is, unless you are willing to defend to grow, to enhance the movement. Now, it is pointless to continue on this thread. The war is reaching I would not say stalemate, but I thought, yeah, it is the slowest battle since the Somme. The winter campaign, of course, Russia has failed to achieve its goals. Now, its goals were not all these oblasts. Then the goals were revised back to sacrifice that they would sacrifice this as a try to get this as a buffer and focus on Donetsk. Though they had made initial gains, it is hard to anybody, no matter. I'm hard pressed to find even a pro-Russian who can explain how this is it is neither winning nor losing. Yet, to some, it is still winning, and to Ukraine, it's winning. We stopped the Russians from conquering all of Ukraine. That's like saying this rock stopped all the elephants from migrating to Australia. You know, it's cope. It's sophistry. It's a ludicrous statement by disingenuous, corrupt people. And to excuse the liberal establishment will excuse Zelenskyy and say, well, he's fighting a war. But so is Trump. America is fighting a war every day, whether you like it or not. When Trump became president, you were fighting wars, whether you liked them or not. And one of those was Iran. One of those was Ukraine. There was also Syria. There was also many other conflicts which Trump has been trying to end. Some started while he was president, and he has tried to end them. But there's a genuine disconnect, particularly amongst people who support Ukraine, who want to make sure this war continues just to embarrass Trump. Liberals want Ukrainians and Russians to die to hurt Trump. Zelenskyy wants Ukrainians and Russians to die for the money to flow. He too wants to hurt Trump because Trump won't give him everything he wants. This is what petulant children do. This is what politicians do. There is very little difference between a petulant child and a politician. Now, I'm not going to zoom in on the front. I can tell you right now, there's the frozen front. There's very little going on in Donetsk. For something that was supposed to be their priority target, the focus has shifted to Zaporozhye. There's very little going on in between. As you can see, the war has over 100 points of contact, but at least 25 to 30 of those, so a third of the conflict. And you look at it. That includes attacks on Kharkiv, Sumy, Kiev, the conflict in the streets of Zaporozhye, Nikolaev was shelled by artillery. Kherson was shelled by artillery. Drones and missile strikes on Odessa. Most of these markers are old. So you can see. Now, the predominant amount of these strikes were aerial bombs. Russia's made gains here and here alone. And they've dropped a few aerial bombs along the front. Now, predominantly, I mean, they will launch only a few salvos of missiles. Now, you compare that to World War II when hundreds of Katyusha were firing at the Germans every day. Now, I don't know if they still call aerial artillery Katyusha. I forget their various code names. I'm not going to bother learning code names and designations. All I'm going to say is 122mm rockets are slowly getting replaced with 132s. 122 is now becoming the light artillery gun, with most heavy artillery guns being upgraded to 152, although there is talk of a 153 gun. That is a special mounted gun for firing special heavy artillery, but it is not common. Same with the 170. I think there's only like 5 or 6 of those. So you can understand, right? This is an expeditionary force. If Russia and Europe were to go to war, it would probably devastate the Baltic states from Latvia, the Baltic states of Latvia, all of them, right? All the way down. It'd scorch the Polish border, probably divide Hungary, Bulgaria, before it stopped. Turkey would be fighting possibly in this region, and they will seize some land. The Greeks and the Albanians might, all of them through here will see missile strikes. Over a third of Russia would be scorched. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who wins, because both sides will lose. Millions will be dead for the ego of Zelenskyy. You think now, all right, it's 100 years since World War II, and Churchill is one of the few names that people remember. You know, more people remember Churchill than Roosevelt, right? Roosevelt and Stalin. Stalin is one of those things where they say, oh, look, history is on Stalin's side. Everybody remembers him. No, most people remember the brutal monsters more than they do the heroes. Nobody's going to remember Zelenskyy in 100 years. Most politicians are driven by their ego. This war is a pointless exercise in ego, which could be settled by rounding up Zelenskyy and his friends and executing them. You could have lost less land. Russia was even prepared to take a cut in some land. Now, whether or not Russia is helping America, or whatever the accusation is the accusation made on Fox that Russia is helping, I think that is an exaggeration. I think inadvertently Iran underestimated and believed huffed their own propaganda. Right now, yes, Iran has a lot of missiles, and they have missile silos still, and they have stockpiles still. Maybe half of their missiles. But having missiles and able to launch missiles, and they're down to what, 80 per day, and every time they launch and every time they move, and they've said to Iranians, if you move, if you're driving around the countryside, you are at risk. If you're heading in convoys, right, head in convoys to the border. But if you're part of a convoy coming back, you're at risk. It's the same in Ukraine. People aren't moving because they're at risk. Ukraine is moving ammunition in cars. They're moving gold and money in cars. It is a ludicrous situation right now in Ukraine. And we can see that both Russia and Ukraine have a pretty similar map, only you can see the majority of fighting is in the north and in the south. These are only sporadic exchanges of gunfire. Or drones and missiles, but artillery fire. That's it. The majority of the conflict is coming to an end or stalled. Now, this was meant to break the deadlock. Russian air power was to break the deadlock, to strike, and they have successfully struck with Su-57s, but not enough. The Americans were able to adapt very quickly the Patriot missiles and able now to threaten most stealth aircraft. The Russians are unable to achieve the air power situation they wanted in they wanted in Ukraine, just like America in Iraq, which, as you know, the swift victory in Iraq and subsequent hopeful swift victory in Iran is due to air power. Now, yes, the air power war in Vietnam was not undermined or won by the Vietnamese. It was undermined by the American leadership, who wanted a diplomatic victory, so they withdrew the air power to get concessions, in which the Russians then turned around and unloaded all their ships, which unloaded lots of missiles and lots of guns. They flooded, something like 15 million AK-47s, some 2 million rounds per month or something. It was absolutely phenomenal amount of guns. Basically, doesn't matter, right? You only had 100,000 combat troops and 1 million crossed the border. That was the Tet Offensive, 1 million. You fought them to a standstill, but that was it. That was the end. You could not get the South Vietnamese to fight back in large numbers. And that was Walter Cronkite and his bad news, constantly telling you you're losing. Ever since he got away with that, American media has been telling you you're losing every war you have fought since Vietnam. You're losing. And none of them are taken to task for their lying, for their aiding and comfort the enemy. It's free speech. Now, back to the Su-57. This was a single seat answer to the F-16. It is an upgraded Su-35, 37, 57, all the technologies. My guess is the 57 and the 30. So you'll have the Su-35, Su-57, Su-35, 75. You know what's going to happen The Su-57 is going to be split apart. The Su-35 will be upgraded, and the Su-37 will be upgraded. But this is why you've seen the single-seater fighter that was displayed about 3 months ago and has only seen test combat once. Right? The Su-57 has seen combat a few times. It was used recently. But it too isn't finished. Now, this is a 5th generation. As the 57 is a hybrid 4th generation. Now, it is a twin-seater now. Well, there's always going to be a twin-seater model for training, but they've upgraded it to Su-57 technology. Right, now going to this is one of 3 test platform aircraft. There are only 3 of these. You've got the single-seater and 2 dual-seaters. This is, as you can see, this is upgraded with electronic warfare package. It has the bigger, you got which is the screen. And this is a screen command and control center. Most likely it also has, with that transmitter, that's probably a drone node. And as you can see, it's a somewhat of a gunfighter, but it is, as you can see, it is a combat fighter. It is not a strike aircraft, ground support. It is a fighter. So why? Well, I thought the Migorans. No, the Migoran 51 is a like the MiG-31 is a strike aircraft. It carries long-range missiles for strike. This is fighter and interceptor. And it has, as you see, the fueling node, the advanced gun, which is the 35mm, I believe. It's the gun casing's closed. You can see it has the digital cockpit. Most aircraft these days have the digital cockpit with the holographic view of the world transmitted up onto the screen, the heads-up display. But it's more advanced than your standard heads-up display. As you can see, it's updated its profile. And yeah, it's got 3 underwing. Does not appear to have a body mount. There. Does have a bay. So, as well as the 3 wing mounts, it has an internal bay. So, yes, it has the elongated bay, the elongated gun pod, and it's got the sweep intake. So, yes. Russia has increased its research and development as opposed to increasing its war budget. Well, overall defense spending is up, but the majority of it is going into new equipment. Now, known as the Checkmate, its maiden flight was originally scheduled for 2023 and again to 2025. Though it's only undergone a few flights, Russia still hopes that by mid-2026 they will begin deliveries of the first batch. Now, this is actually designed as an export aircraft. Again, that's why I say, you got the MiG, a heavier fighter, like the F-16. This is like the F-16, single engine fighter. That they're going to have a lot of these, but the MiG twin engine heavy fighter the new one will not be exported. It's like Britain. When Britain went into countries, they gave them guns, but never the cannons. Always keep the cannons, said General Haig. And he was right. Always keep the cannons. Now, this is to compete with the export of the F-35 and the Chinese Xi'an 31. Now, the initial production forecast was 300 planes over 15 years. Notice they don't mention the French aircraft. That was a surprise, the Rafale export model, and they've exported 135 of them, which is about half of the expected production. And already in the Middle East, Russia and China are losing customers. It looks like Pakistan is buying Rafales. India, even India, who has slated to buy some Su-75, they wanted some 57s, they wanted some MiG-31s, they wanted a lot. India's gearing up for war, there's no doubt about it. They are pushing their Air Force every day to grow at an unnecessary rate. They already have a lot of aircraft. Same with Iran was pushing, and you saw that over the last few years, pushing more aircraft, right? The more you buy, the closer you get to war. There is no point in buying a 20-year-old. There's no point in buying lots of aircraft. They're only going to last 20 years, maybe, some bit longer. Now, in a sign of good faith, in what they would call a trust-building exercise, right? They don't go to camp, and you can imagine Putin at one of the trust-building camps on the ropes, and he's trying to swirl the rope to knock Zelenskyy off. Yeah. Or the Zelenskyy, the trust falls, Zelenskyy goes to fall back, and Putin's off at the picnic table and says, that was today? So, second group of prisoners. The first group was 200. Second group was 300. There's suspicions of a third group, but so far, no. It looks like the third meeting will be a body swap. Now, this is the main story. Hungary has seized millions in gold and cash, and this is not the first time. Allegedly, Zelenskyy has moved billions in cash from Austrian banks to Ukraine. Euros. Remember, Ukraine does not use euros. Who are they paying this cash to? And gold, right? And remember, lots of gold and cash have been showing up in China. My guess is these are actually payments the Chinese officials to supply Ukraine with drones. That this money comes from donations to Ukrainian. You see, if you do enough of this war, you'll see ads for supporting Ukrainian journalism, Ukrainian aid packages, and they all go to Austrian banks. Will you start figuring out that Ukraine is not using this aid as intended, but they are buying weapons for cash from either India or China? And remember, Chinese general recently was arrested with a big shipment of cash and gold. Now, my guess is Xi is pissed because they are selling. They're not selling Ukraine commercial drones, but military secrets. Ukraine has been buying interceptor drones from China, and that's how Ukraine was able to grow its drone industry with the help of the British, of course. But this is not just about the seizure of gold and money, right? Viktor Orbán's life has been threatened by Ukraine because of the refusal to send it weapons or approve aid, and has been seizing cash in more cars, shipping car. Now, it started with various obscenities from Zelenskyy, and now it's open threats. Suggested that of course, Zelenskyy has also threatened the lives of Russian officials. Initially, that was not taken seriously, and he has hired murderers. This is also another belief that a lot of this cash and gold is going to organised crime to fund murder in Russia. And a lot of people justify it as, well, the resistance. You forget, after World War II, the resistance turned into organised crime. It started with Picasso smuggling from Iran, then guns, gold, tried to start a war in Greece. They tried to start a revolution in France. Millions of Europeans went to the Middle East to fight wars. Millions, not a small number of people left. It's significant enough to cause a drop in the population of France. Millions went to the Middle East to fight wars in Syria, in Iran, Iraq. Wars that there are so many undocumented wars around the world. But after World War II, millions of the so-called resistance left to fight more wars. That's why there were so few left by, I think, the first resistance, it was at 58, I think it was, in France, to honour the resistance. Hardly anybody showed up. They're already dead. Gone to wars. Algeria, millions died over 1 million died in Algeria, I think. Fighting for the Foreign Legion. Now, Russia's moving forward in what's called the buffer zone, right? This is an indication the war is coming to an end. The Russian statement is that from police reporters, our troops are moving forward. They're creating appropriate buffer zones. Now, yes, but what he did say is they're moving forward at the pace of a snail due to heavy Ukrainian resistance. That, yes, Russia underestimated the size of the Ukrainian army. Ukraine was able, in the last 2 years, to increase the size of its army, but is not able to launch any offensive. Every time they've tried to build an offensive army, it gets crushed before it reaches the front line. Now, in Hungary today, as reported about these, very few organisations have reported about the cash seizure or mentioned that they are connected to the Ukrainian Secret Service. They identified themselves as Ukrainian agents, initially working as for the banks, and claimed this was a transfer between banks, but they did not settle this in the normal manner between banks for bank transfers. Why large amounts of cash, and why transport it through Hungary without notification? They did not engage in legal notification, right? Why was it being stored in Hungary? Who were they working with in Hungary? Right now, there are a whole bunch of questions, and Viktor Orbán, the foreign minister, says this is the Ukrainian war mafia. These are the people who've been moving cash and gold, not grams, kilograms, right? Ounces of gold. It's worth thousands of dollars. This is billions. Over $1 billion in cash. Ukraine has claimed Orbán of taking hostages and holding Ukraine's money hostage. They immediately notified Ukraine about the proceedings, the investigation into the origins of the money and the gold. Ukraine has failed to respond. Austria said, yes, it came from our banks. That is all right, that we have. But however, Government Information Service in Hungary announced that the 7 Ukrainian citizens have been identified and that they are under investigation for the illegal transport of cash and gold. It is actually illegal to move large amounts of cash through a country without notifying them. And apparently one of them is a former Ukrainian Air Force officer. One is a former general. In light of the circumstances, they are being expelled. Didn't say them with the money. My guess is this was illegal appropriations from either of arms. This was a black market weapons purchase, is my theory. And it makes sense since many Chinese generals recently have been arrested for engaging in black marketeering of fuel, of rocket fuel, of rocket components, of drones and explosives and munitions. Who needs a lot of explosives and munitions? But Zelenskyy, to break the deadlock, did not explain himself or why he thinks he's above the law, that he would not notify or move this cash through normal legal means, such as you put them on a diplomatic flight you put it on a diplomatic flight and bring it to your country through diplomatic means. So that, right, countries do this all the time, right? Whenever America wants to deliver a donation, aka influence peddling, a bribe to an African warlord, they put it on a diplomatic flight to Africa. Normally, the African nation will send an aircraft for aid, and it would leave with a diplomatic pouch, aka a sealed container full of cash. Well, actually, not a huge container, and it's a pallet, and it's got lots of sticky tape on it and black tarp, but everybody knows what's in it. So Zelenskyy threatens to send Ukrainian soldiers to explain things to Viktor Orbán in their own way, in their own language. The only language he understands is force. So, once again, while the left keep claiming right does not make might, might does not make right, that's exactly what they do. They engage in might. They don't protest, they bully. They do not engage in good faith verbal arguments. They hurl slurs and insults. And of course, as you know, they hurl bottles of ice and attack police. You cannot hate the left enough, I swear. And Zelenskyy is a petty tyrant, a low-class bully, and America should be ashamed of supporting Ukraine. Now, the left, if Zelenskyy was right-wing, you'd be shamed. But look, remember when the left abandoned, right? If Russia was communist, the left would be doing everything they can to shame you out of supporting Zelenskyy. Yet here they are, glazing someone who is worse than Batista, far worse than General Tay. No. The level of hypocrisy of the left is humongous. And the level of cowardice on the right is tremendous. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. Yes, I know, but people take things personally and don't want to watch my channel anymore. Do I look like I care about the opinions of individuals who are engaged in criminality? The whole world is falling apart because the majority will not stand, look in the mirror and say, am I the bad guy? Why am I the bad guy? Why am I supporting bad things? You support me instead. Instead of giving money to Ukraine, give money to me. Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links in the link tree, description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.